Good afternoon, folks. Welcome to our chat this afternoon about this word that seems to be around the whole industry, sustainability. So we have some distillers here who are going to tell us about what they're doing, but what in general is sustainability, Gordon? What's this all about?
Sustainability is probably core to Scotch whisky. We do nothing in the short term in Scotch whisky production, and we have whiskies 10 years, 15 years, 20 years old, and we have to sustain that production into the future. When we look at the footprint of the industry, and we did this when the industry was really waking up to this as an industry, we basically discovered, to our surprise, that the Scotch whisky industry is equivalent to another Scottish city.
Right.
In terms of the energy that it uses, in terms of what comes out of it, in terms of its waste products that comes out of it, in terms of its co-products. And that was going up. The plans then were being laid for the expansion of the industry. And very quickly realised at very senior levels within the industry that was not sustainable. It just going into the future, we can't keep using the same energy levels, we can't still agricultural terms, the amount of barley that we need, the amount of maize that we need, the amount of wood that we need. How is that going to be sustainable into the future, given that we are a long-term industry that has existed really since medieval times, and we still want to be here hundreds of years into the future. So the industry has really grabbed that sometimes those big pictures get lost because we're a diffuse industry that divided into different distilleries, divided into different packaging halls around the country, and it often boils down to what seems small regulation when you get down to. But the big picture is one of energy saving, one of maintaining agricultural sustainability, getting into the circular economy, making sure that we lead on that we're ahead of the game, that we're not being pushed by regulation because we can see the direction of travel with that, and that we're good environmental neighbours in Scotland. Many of our distilleries are in environmentally sensitive areas. That we don't damage those environmentally sensitive areas, and in fact we improve those environmentally sensitive areas. We're not just going to keep regulation, we're going to go one beyond. So that's why it's become such a hot topic.
Thank you. So on my left, you guys are producing now, and Jenny, you are in one of the most gorgeous parts of the country. So what are you doing about sustainability and circular economy?
So the way we think about sustainability is like we link it very heavily with the word responsibility. We have a responsibility to the area we're in. You've already mentioned location. It's so far out west. You can't get any further west on the mainland of Britain. We are, I suppose you could say, we're forced to use circular economy, but we choose to use it. We choose to be in that location. So it's simple. What we take from the area, we also put back in. Right. So it's is making whiskey in a responsible way while giving back to the local economy. So we work very closely with this plant, it's about 2 kilometres away from the distillery. It's called Woodland Renewables, and they provide us with biomass, renewable forestry that they chip for our biomass boiler. So our stills are heated by steam that's generated from this biomass boiler. So that's 100% renewable energy. And this company, Woodland Renewables, they have a 100-year plan in action to continuously plant these forests, and so we can continue supply the peninsula, because it's not just us that are using the biomass, it's also the school, it's the hotels, it's about keeping that the green footprint as light as possible, or the carbon footprint as light as possible. But also on that we have a hydro electric generator that helps generating electricity. It heats up the houses around the distillery. We're just now this week, in fact we had to cancel it for a couple of weeks because of weather, but we're installing solar panels, which can be optimistic considering we're in Scotland. I think the weather does play a big part into this as well. But we have just installed 138 solar panels.
Right.
So that's to add to the grid as well, and we can sell energy back to the local area. But also on that note, making whiskey is about, you take and you make, and then you also have the byproducts.
Yeah.
And a lot of tours that you go on will tell you that happily they feed animals on their draft, and that's a big part. It's great, that's one of the byproducts. But you also have the pot ale, and you spent lees, and the washing water. That's probably, if we're going to be touching on that, how can you work with stuff that you're washing your equipment with? What can you do with that water? That's our biggest challenge. But what we're doing with the pot ale is we're piping it over to Woodland Renewables. They dehydrate it, they turn it into a kind of thick slurry liquid and mix it with the draff and turn it into food pellets for the animals. So it's, as soon as it's pellets, it's dried and it can be stored and shipped to any sort of farms in Scotland. There's a lot that we're doing. It's not a switch. It's being sustainable, being responsible. It's not just a one switch. Yeah. We're removing all our packaging. It's a bottle of whiskey. It's a QR code. We have full transparency on the back of that. And it's about the whiskey, it's about the flavour. You don't need a box. So more and more markets that we're in 37 markets right now. We had a meeting with them all in September, asked their opinion about the box. And as you would imagine, the markets just like China, Taiwan. They're keen on boxes, but we can give them a little bit of leeway where they get to create their own boxes locally, because that takes away from our shipping, and it means that they have that on site. It's made there anyway, Whereas in America, they're keen to go without boxes. Europe, we're in France without boxes later this year. The UK, no box. So there's a lot we can do and continue doing, and we are.
And it sounds like it's the whole process from purchase of raw materials right the way through to selling a final product, sustainability kind of the whole way through.
Yeah, absolutely. It runs through. It's that whole how can we do this in a responsible way while adding value to the area. We have this charity in Ardnamurchan called Ardnamurchan Trust, and it was created to add value to the people that live on the peninsula. Many people think environment is about the ground we walk on and the trees that are growing around us, but it's about people as well. It's very heavily about the social environment as well as the green environment. So we're every child that turns 10 on the peninsula gets through this charity ownership of a cask of whiskey. We made headline news when that came out because it wasn't angled in a way that we didn't attempt. But hear me out. When the child turns 18, through the charity, they can then release that cash and with their future plan. So if they're going to university, if they want a JCB license, if they want to build on the future, it's all about investing in the next generation. So they can use that money to build their life up, if you like, and that's also part of. Like you said, it's not a switch. It's not like just a one-off. It's constant. The whole responsible distilling, it's always there.
Excellent. Thank you. That's fascinating.
Yeah.
We move over when I get some more grandchildren and get a cask.
Get yourself out,
cask. So you're not as far west, Scott, but I'm assuming you're doing.
Yeah, like you, sustainability is a word that's got many facets. So what we looked at for us as our carbon footprint is how we went about assessing ourselves for sustainability. So the building and designing of the distillery, it's a singular building, not multiple buildings. Where we can, we've taken the vats outside. We use technology of TVR so that we're recovering about 40% of our energy back from the distillation phase. We use our excess water to heat the offices and the control room for that. So that was from the very basic, the starting point. As we're growing as a business, so now our pot ale and draft, it gets sent across the road to an AD plant, and that AD plant then creates biogas that then comes back into the main gas main, that we then take a portion of that back to operate our boiler. We're also looking at in the next couple of years is putting hydrogen to our boiler rather than using it as natural gas. Because when we did the study, about 35% of our carbon footprint was from the burning of the gas in the boiler. So by going to green hydrogen, that's a 35% improvement. So that's what we're looking at for the next couple of years. But beyond that, we're looking at how the grain, how the barley's grown, because about 60% of the carbon footprint is from the actual growing of the barley and the subsequent malting of the barley. So we're looking at how can we support our supply chain and trying to reduce that. So it's just really not just looking at yourself, but looking down the supply chain, and like you said, Jenny, is then look at, we've not got a product in the market yet, but as part of our sustainability, we will be looking at how we can minimise the impact on the final bottle when it goes to the market.
Yeah. So again, it's, well, you mentioned raw materials right through to the final product again. Excellent.
Definitely. You can't just look at in isolation. You've got to look at the whole supply chain of your product.
Yeah. So it kind of determines your day-to-day operation.
Yeah, I mean, it
helps determine that.
It helps determine. It helps you understand that. No, like you've said before. No, we are not doing this to be. This isn't a short term. This is a long term plan. No, don't go into whiskey for a short term. You're there for a long, long time, and that means you've got to look how technology is changing, what sustainability looks like, and going forward. So we try to get as much of that in the original design, but as only as we're growing as a business, that the infrastructure is then growing to be able to support that. Green hydrogen was not about, it's been talked about for a number of years, but it's only in the coming years it seems to be getting a bit of traction, and the infrastructure is going to be in place to be able to use it. And then again, the farming element to it has only been coming out in the last few years, is we're starting to ask the questions of our supply chain that goes all the way down to the farmer.
I think one of the things I notice about sustainability is that you can define the problems or the issues sort of globally for the industry, but when you look at solutions, they're very much tailored for individual circumstances. I think we've just heard there how individual distilleries have met these problems, because they're different in geographical location, the difference in supply chains, but the industry does have a target to be carbon neutral, and there are some intractable problems there, so we're going to need innovation to really meet that. And one of the big problems, what do we do with warm water? And there's things, having double condensers, so you get hot water off the top and cold water, usable water at a temperature you can use. Because once you've heated the visitor centre and the
local swimming pool,
whatever, you've still got a lot of warm water left. So that's a real issue, and that's one it's still to be solved. And the other one is bottles. We have to put whiskey into bottles, and they have to have strength because they have to be exported all over the world. So we've probably reached the limit we can in lightweighting. We've also got problems with premiumisation, where bottles are getting bigger. So we've still got to, and there's innovation happening there. People are looking at different materials to make bottles out. So there's these long-term issues, but what really surprised me, being in the industry right from the beginning when this became a real is the amount of advance that's been made. We're saving a quarter of the energy now that from just the innovations we've just heard about our helping the environment, our social programs never didn't exist when I joined the industry at all, and now they're really powerful and very and successful, indeed successful.
You've mentioned bottles, and it's interesting because a lot of the markets, and you'll notice this when you're coming out with products, is a lot of the markets are now actually putting demands on distilleries and spirit producers. So Sweden is the latest one to do so. Canada's done it, that they have to have a minimum weight, or a maximum weight, of course, sorry. And it's important that you're aware that this is happening across the world. It's not just the Scandinavians and the Canadians. No, it's not going away. It's constant. So always be be alert and aware and keep on top of it.
That's the advantage of being ahead of the game, as it were, because we are a long-term industry. So we're already trying to position ourselves in a place where when we can see the direction of travel. Regulation is only going to get worse and worse. So let's be ahead of that.
Yeah. What I like with the industry as well is that we're quite a friendly industry, as the small and medium companies tend to share experiences. So all of our 3 distilleries are young, the younger generation, but we I think we're similar age. 2014 we distilled our first spirit, and just shortly after another distillery on the peninsula or opposite us started distilling, and we could share experiences with them. We could say, well, we tried that didn't work, but we can recommend the biomass, and then they take on that, and it's that's the only way it's going to work, because using innovation is a risk. There's a very big risk involved in that, and as again, one of the challenges that who takes that risk. you do it, then we'll see if it work. So sharing is caring in a way. Like we really.
I can remember with anaerobic digestion when AED was first introduced, it didn't work, and a number of I still think it's the odd distillery around that's got the plant rusting away. Yeah. Now it's a very viable alternative, even for small distilleries. But so they are. I think it's the responsibility of the larger companies to take that risk and to put this investment in, and then the smaller companies can come in behind, behind that.
So Andy, you are obviously a completely different environment and place from Jenny there, almost in the centre of town. What kind of issues have you got around about sustainability? What are you doing?
Well, to start with our raw materials, when we were discussing where we were going to source our malt, we talked about whether we wanted to be organic, but then we found that to be organic it needs to be malted in the south of England. So you're adding road miles, whereas we've partnered with a farm in East Lothian, which we can just about see from the top floor of the distillery. And the malt's going the barley's going about 60 miles to the maltings in Alloa, and then it's 30-40 miles back to us. So it's one of the shortest journeys that barley will take from farm to distillery. A lot of the other challenges we face, there are things we'd love to be doing, but our site is very limited. We don't have any space. Our yard is about the size of this room. And we spoke to people about syrup, pot ale dehydrated to make syrup. We've no space for it. But we do have opportunities with housing development that's in the works next door to us. We might be able to sell them our excess heat from our boiler, and then with the verticality of our building, we're taking all our raw materials up to the 4th floor, and then our process is working its way down through. Still need to use some pumps and some, but we're able to minimise them to minimise the amount of energy we're using.
I think it's key that what we said before is that there's not one solution fits all. No. And it's about understanding the different facets, and we're all being quite innovative in the different way, from the fuel to the sourcing of the barley. And I think it's only by looking at all the different components you can be as completely sustainable as you can be. We'll never be zero. I think you'll always have, just for the very nature of what we produce, you'll never be a carbon neutral.
No, unless it didn't exist.
Unless it didn't exactly. That's it. So I think for us, as we're trying to be as low carbon footprint as we can be, that's our goal, and that means, and because of that, you never stop.
I think we can be carbon neutral. I think it can be done. I think it can be done. I think it's very difficult, and as I say, there are areas that are intractable at the moment. Yeah. But if you just look at the way things are changing, the way new technologies are coming. Heat pumps, for instance, just weren't viable, but they only have to get 25% more efficient, and they will be viable. Suddenly, they turn around. Green energy used to be a dream, from renewables. Now we have days where the grid is 100% renewable electricity. That's within a period of about 20 years. So in another 20 years, which brings us up to where we're targeted for, I think it's quite possible to be carbon neutral. I don't believe that it's...
But going to need innovation.
Going to need innovation, yeah.
Financial input.
Some of the easier low-hanging fruit, if you like, has been done.
Got it.
Has been done. So there's some real difficult...
this is the aspect I love in talking about this topic, the responsible distilling, sustainable distilling, because I've been in industry as well for 20 years now, and the people that you meet when you're out on your trips, when you're talking, we're doing tastings, when you're talking to consumers, they've changed so much dramatically. It's so important that we follow that trend. We're meeting a new generation of whiskey drinkers now, and no longer do they say, oh, bourbon mature, that must be vanilla flavours. They're wanting to know what do you do with your water sources, and how do you get rid of your wastewater, and they're interested, and they want to know They want to know the people and what value you add to the area that you're in. And I think it's only natural that we move with that. And I think that's the one common thing that each of our distillers have said, is that about adding value to where we are, no matter if you're on an island in the middle of a city, or it's great that people our consumers are going with that as well.
I think you're absolutely right. It's the value added aspect of it, because that's what really pushes our board of directors is that it's not just a social responsibility. It actually is good for the product as well. It becomes
and do it properly. That none of this greenwashing, where let's plant a tree for every bottle we sell. If I hear that one more time, no, we're doing it. It has to be genuine. It has to add value.
I remember that real change, and it happened very, very quickly in the industry. From we will keep to regulation into no, we're going to be leaders in this, and we genuinely mean this. We've got to, because no one's going to believe us as a big consuming industry, big user of industry of energy. We actually genuinely have to produce. So targets were given for the industry, which were very difficult, and still some of those targets are not sure how they're going to be met.
Actually, as an advice to, you're the same age as us, but the one thing that was a bit of a challenge now is the data that we gather. Because we're a small company, we're quite a small distillery, we have all this data that we accumulated on various systems and spreadsheets, but we hadn't had the analytics done on it, because we don't have a big firm where we can send it off to. And when it comes to reporting, because people are asking now, and every interview you do, they're always looking for numbers and data. Analyze your data and make sure you have a graph. It's boring, but have it there. You need to have the data analyzed, and that's another driving factor behind it.
It's difficult to believe, but actually regulation gets in the way for Scotch whisky. Regulation is designed to push recalcitrant companies down the sustainable route. But if you're already ahead of the game, you're already genuinely trying to be environmentally responsible, sustainable both socially as well as environmentally, then that regulation, which is designed to push people along, actually gets in the way. And of course that needs talks and discussions with government and et cetera, and they've been quite successful. But that's one of the bureaucratic problems that we suffer from.
Yeah, but it's an agenda that's here to stay.
Yes, absolutely.
And it's something that everybody's going to be interested in the future, and I'm sure it's something that we will talk about at a later date. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.